When I was in university, my evolutionary psychology teacher told us that we have the same brains as the first humans did 200,000 years ago. And now that's not exactly an accurate statement, but it is true that scientists have proven that we have the same brains as we did about 40,000 years ago. And now let's put that into perspective. 40,000 years ago, we took over as the primary human species from Neanderthals. And then 10,000 years later, we see the earliest invention of textiles, as in clothing. And then about 10,000 years ago, so 20,000 years after we started wearing clothing, we see the woolly mammoth go extinct. And you know, if you've ever seen the movie Ice Age, our brains essentially are the same as the people that were in that movie. And also you have to consider that that was about 20,000 years after the time period that I'm talking about. This concept should absolutely shock you, unless you know you've already taken evolutionary psych, and in that way we can just kind of geek out about this together. But if our brains haven't evolved significantly from a period 40,000 years ago, you know, a time where we had to hunt for every single meal we ate, run away from various predators, and really belong and exist within a community that was successful and hardworking in order to survive. And if all of that is true, if our brain is the same as it was all of those years ago, then how can it possibly deal with the stressors of today? Which could be, among the many, the unanswered text, the stressful work deadline, or the rising cost of living. And how can this concept better help us understand some of the really big societal questions and issues, such as the climbing rate of anxiety or the increased rate of burnout? And how can we, as individuals, use this information to better deal with our own fears, our irrationalities, our worries in today's modern world? That's what we're going to be talking about today, so if that's interesting, stick around, we're going to get right into it. Okay, let's get comfy and we'll adjust this guy. 40,000 years ago, our stressors, they looked like a saber-toothed tiger, your community being attacked, starvation, your body, it responds fast. Think of adrenaline rush. Your heart rate's going to increase. You're going to get ready for that fight or flight response. And it's that reaction that keeps you alive. So your brain, it is wired to do it. More than anything else, your brain is wired to keep you alive. Now, what are those stresses in today's world? Well, maybe your boss sends you a vague email. Maybe somebody doesn't respond to your text. Or maybe you just can't stop doom scrolling and all you see is news article after event after other world event that just makes you think that the world is going to shit. And the real kicker is that your brain reacts the exact same way as it did to the saber-toothed tiger. You have the same hormonal cascade. You're going to have that increased in heart rate. And when you have the exact same physical response, but you can't necessarily run away from that unanswered email. When you have a situation like this, where your heart rate is going to increase without that physical exertion, we end up often attributing this feeling as anxiety. And I want to paint a picture for you, one that I think most of us, if not all, can relate to. Let's say you text your friend asking to hang out. And you know, probably a few minutes go by, and then about an hour goes by, and you still haven't heard. Now, this is your friend. You know that they like you. But still, there's that little tiny voice in your head saying that,
well, they might never respond. I don't know if they like me anymore. They probably think I'm weird. They probably don't want to hang out.
Now, what is that voice? It feels so irrational when you have all of this evidence that your friend does like you, your friend does want to hang out. They don't think you're weird at all. They're just busy. So though it seems irrational, I want to argue that your brain, your Ice Age brain, it doesn't think that it is. To your brain, a friend not answering you, no matter how long, signifies that you may be encountering some social isolation. And back when the mammoths existed, this meant death. And I'm not being dramatic. Humans could really only live and thrive if they belong to a community that, like I said, worked hard. You had the hunters, you had the gatherers, you had other people within the society to fill all of those niche roles. And so if you didn't belong to a community like that, you often had a much harder time at, handling life, but more often than not, you probably perished. And so I want to go back to what I was saying at the beginning of the video, and that's that our brains haven't changed. And so when your friend doesn't answer you, even for a couple of hours, your brain thinks that you are being socially isolated. Our brains simply haven't evolved to understand delayed communication. Because if you think about it, I'm talking back in the day, back in ancestral times, we didn't have any delay of communication. You'd ask your friend, your neighbor to go pick blueberries with you. They were right there. You were face to face. There was no delay in that communication. And so right away, you're going to see and know that your friend is how they always have been. The other aspect that our brains, haven't picked up on at all is that lack of face-to-face communication. So often we see miscommunications when it comes to text, and that's because humans have evolved, prior to the 40,000 years ago, humans have evolved to communicate nonverbally, whether that's through body posture, facial expressions, or just intonation in the voice, which all are lost during that written communication through text or email or even written letters. All of this to say, you are not irrational when you get the urge to run away from a passive email from your boss. You are simply just feeling the instincts that our ancestors did, but in a modern world. Okay, so what can you do about it? And I'm gonna say, be rational and live in a prehistoric world. And what I mean is the best way to deal with this mismatch is to actually pretend like it's 40,000 years ago and play into your natural tendencies. Now, I want to be clear, this doesn't mean that you justify all of your actions when you feel abandoned by your friend by sending 30 different text messages, trying to get them to respond to you right away. But what it does mean is I want you to sit back and ask the question, what would make me feel better 40,000 years ago? Okay, so let's play out this situation completely. It's 40,000 years ago, you ask your friend to hang out and they just don't respond, they walk away because, again, there's no text, so that's the closest we can get. What would make you feel better? More than likely, what would make you feel better is to hang out with someone else. Make sure you're getting that social connection elsewhere to make sure you're not being socially isolated. It might be getting a hug from someone else, maintaining eye contact, having really deep conversations, sharing a meal right around a fire. And now today we can't always replicate that, but a lot of those things we technically could. I'd suggest that you reach out to another friend. Maybe you call them would be probably a better option than texting. Often doing something with your hands tricks your brain into feeling that you're productive. So whether that's cooking, cleaning, or doing something else, knitting, sewing, painting. And more than anything, I would say getting some sort of physical exercise can be really, really beneficial when you're feeling incredibly anxious. And that's kind of going back to something I had mentioned previously, is that when you are anxious, your heart rate goes up. If you can trick your brain into thinking that your heart rate is up because you're physically exercising, sometimes it tricks your brain out of anxiety. And now I want to say that this does not work all the time. This is definitely not in lieu of seeking out therapy or really dealing with your mental health problems. But if you're feeling anxious and you know, hey, this is more of an irrational fear than anything else, but my heart rate's really high, I'd recommend going for a walk or doing some stretches, doing whatever you can just to get your heart rate moving up, physically, and really playing into the biology to trick your brain. And now this isn't just for the scenario with your friend, it can be used for all different types of scenarios. So instead of focusing on that one scenario, I'd recommend just kind of these steps to get you through. First is going to be an awareness that you are actually having more of an irrational fear, and this takes time, it takes practice, but eventually it starts to be really easy to label your thoughts as various different things. And if you can label it as, hey, you know what, I think this is an irrational fear. I don't have very much evidence for this. That is an amazing step number 1. Step number 2 is going to be whether or not you can identify the evolutionary threat. So again, going back to that example with a friend, it's more the thought of social isolation that your brain is being triggered by. And then I want you to reason through what would have made you feel better if this was 40,000 years ago. And when in doubt, if you're feeling like your heart rate is really up and rising, I would recommend some form of light physical exercise, just because I do think it works with most scenarios if you notice that heart rate being up. So no, your brain is not broken. It's simply working on old machinery in a really modern world that it's not used to and hasn't evolved to adapt to. Understanding this concept and doing some of those exercises that we talked about will help you better deal with your stress, or at least be more compassionate towards it, and hopefully in the end alleviate some of that stress. And I don't think this is going away anytime soon. Obviously it hasn't gone away for those 40,000 years. Very slowly it will adapt, but me and you, we probably won't be here for that. So instead of trying to fight it, I just suggest working with it. And sometimes the most rational thing you can do is sit back, take a deep breath, and realize that you're not being chased by a lion. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me today. Thanks, guys.